Hey everybody, hope you're doing great today. In this video I'm going to talk about a vacation I recently just took. I was out of the area for 7 days. I didn't have anybody around who's going to be able to feed my fish, take care of any tanks, take care of any issues. So I ended up doing a couple things to make sure everything was okay. Now in many cases, if you're gone for a couple of days, my suggestion is just to leave the tanks as is. Check to make sure everything's running okay. Your filters are up and running. Your heaters are up and running as well too. And then a couple days you're gone, your fish aren't going to miss you, especially if they're adult fish. Now I've got fry fish, very small fish, from newly hatched to about 1 inch in size. They're Geleutochromis, which I've showed in another video. So in this tank over here behind me, and then this new tank over here that I set up recently to house just the fry. So with them, with fry, a lot of fish keepers know that you need to feed them more frequently. And with them, I do feed twice a day. But with the Geleutochromis, it's nice that they're happy to munch algae that's in the tank. So this tank over here, you can see it's got a bunch of algae in it. I don't clean it, I leave the algae in there. That way if it does happen that I'm not able to come down in time before the lights turn off, that they still got something to eat, they're munching on the algae, they're not going hungry. With this new 40 gallon over here, when I set it up, it didn't have much algae. Obviously it was a brand new setup. But what it did have is I picked up an existing sponge filter from this other tank here behind me that had a bunch of algae on it. So by putting it in there with that algae, they had something to munch on, the fry in there. They could munch on that algae, and I didn't have to worry that they would be underfed. Now, because I have a number of juvenile fish, the fry here and the fry in that tank, and then my shell dwellers behind me over here, I did decide to use some automatic feeders. So I used a couple of automatic feeders. I had one original from Aquarium Co-op that I bought a couple of years ago, and then I bought 2 recently from Amazon because I didn't have the time to wait for a couple more from Aquarium Co-op. Tested them all out. They worked fine. Put them in with flake food, basically ground up flake food, just mainly for the fries. So especially with the Geleutochromis, there's small fry on this side, small fry on that side. And then with the shell dwellers, they're still juveniles, they're small. So I just wanted to give them something to eat. I wasn't as sure that they're going to be munching on algae like the other fish are. So with the juveniles, definitely they need to be fed. The feeders took care of them. They have algae in the tank, so I didn't need to worry about them. When it comes to the adult fish, I did not need to worry about them because they're adults. Especially these Geleutochromis and these Lulupis down here who've been with me for at least a couple of years. And then I've got my Pseudotropheus solosi upstairs. They're also mature. They got enough body weight. And the Pseudotropheus love to graze on algae, so there's algae in that tank. They have something to munch on. Same thing with the Geleutochromis and the Lulupi tank over here. There's algae that they can munch on. They were all fine. No issues with them for a week while I was gone. And in fact, all my tanks were fine. I didn't see any dead fish anywhere. The shrimp tank that I have right behind me over here, it's also packed with algae. I don't really clean it. I let them munch on it. So I wasn't even worried about them at all because there's plenty of algae in the tank, and they actually did clean up quite a bit of the algae that was still there. There's still plenty of algae for them to munch on too. Now, if somebody is going on a vacation for a little longer time, let's say more than 7 days, or they're really concerned about feeding their fish, there are a couple different options. So, one of the options, as I already explained before, is the automatic feeders. Those work. You just got to find a good one that works well. You don't want it overfeeding. Underfeeding is okay as long as it is feeding, but overfeeding, you run the risk of messing with your aquarium cycle. Too much food at once can cause the ammonia to spike, cause the nitrite to spike, basically harm your fish, so we don't want that. So before going on your vacation, you want to make sure that that aquarium feeder works properly. It's got enough power, it's got fresh batteries, if it's batteries, or it's fully charged, if it's a rechargeable one, and that it runs when you want it to run. Another option I've seen is those feeder blocks. You can find these at your local pet store. They're these large, dense blocks that you put them in, and they're supposed to feed the fish over time. So depending on your fish, if they're pretty greedy, they want to eat all the time, they can finish up those blocks pretty quickly. So the problem then becomes, you've dumped all that food in your tank, increasing the waste in your tank all of a sudden. That could cause spikes in ammonia, spikes in nitrite. So I'm not a big fan of those. Depending on your fish, if it's a week or less, they're mature fish, you don't necessarily need to feed them. They're used to going without food in the wild for some periods of time. The feeder blocks as well too, I've seen in the past, the ones I've used in the past, you drop them in, a day or two, they're gone. They either dissolve pretty quickly because they're not made well, or the fish just devour them completely, and then after that they're left with nothing. Another option is to have a friend or family member come by and take care of your fish, feed them. So the issues you may run into too when you have a family member or friend feed your fish is that they don't know how much to feed. And as many of us know, when we come into the room, a lot of our fish look at us like they haven't eaten in years. So that's your fish, that's the way they behave. But somebody who doesn't keep fish, who don't know about that, they might think, oh, I need to keep feeding them. Because they keep looking at me like they're hungry. But we know that's not the case. In my case, I just feed them a little pinch. I'll be back 5 minutes later. They'll look at me like, hey, you didn't feed me anything. So same thing with our friends and family. Best way to deal with that is to make sure that the portions are set out properly. So maybe go purchase one of those pill dispensers that have like a day of the week, and you can just sprinkle a little bit of food in there. So that way when they're putting the food in, they're only sprinkling that amount of food. So Monday gets Monday's amount, Tuesday gets Tuesday amount. That way they're getting a specific amount of food, and make sure that you let your friends or family members know that that's all they need. Even if they look at them hungry, they'll be fine. Nothing's going to happen. In fact, the opposite can happen. If they overfeed them, they could end up being killed because of a spike in ammonia, a spike in nitrate, and they don't want that. So preparations begun for a 7-day trip out of town. I've got a couple of auto feeders set up. So I've got one auto feeder set up here because I've got baby fry, and Julitochromis parents who are in the process of tending to eggs. Decided to add a feeder here. And so they're only going to get fed once a day. But as you can see, there's plenty of algae in this tank, and so the Julitochromis happily munch on that algae. So I believe they'll be fine. Did put another auto feeder here. This is because these are multifasciatus. They're still juvenile, still small, not full size yet. So I'm not sure that they're going to be able to handle that many days without food. Now this shrimp tank, on the other hand, you can see they're munching on a snack I put in there. But they've got plenty of food to eat in the tank, and that's this algae that you can see all over the tank. Right now I haven't cleaned the front of this glass because they happily munch on it. You can see pretty thick pieces of algae. So at some point in time in the past, this back part of the tank on the floor of the tank was covered in that algae. You can see there's some remaining algae right there. So it was coated in that algae, but they managed to clean it all up. I mean, even the side 2 was coated in the algae. As you can see, the filters have plenty of algae on them, as well as the back wall. So I don't have any concerns that they won't have anything to eat. I do have some leaf litter in there. There's an old dead leaf in there, and I just stuck in this Amazon sword. I left the dying leaves on it because the shrimp enjoy munching on the dying leaves. So I'm not worried about this tank at all. This other tank is underpopulated. I've got 4 Lulupis and 1 Julitochromis who's hiding around there. Again, I haven't cleaned the front of this because it gives them something to munch on. The Julitochromis especially. You can see him back there. He enjoys munching on algae. And I'm probably guessing that the Lulupis will do it, but they're large enough. They're full-grown adults, been with me for a couple of years now. So I don't think they'll have any issues going for lack of food for about 7 days. Especially with the algae here too, I'm pretty sure they're going to munch on the algae as well too. The tank that I have the most concern about is this tank here, and these are the Julitochromis fry, about 35 plus fry that were moved from the other tank there that I just showed you. So I did add an automatic feeder over here. This feeder is an aquarium co-op feeder, and these other 2 feeders here, something I bought off of Amazon, just got a couple of days ago. So hopefully they work fine. But there are a bunch of fry in here. So they also do have algae. This is a newer tank, so not as filled with algae, but the filter is from an existing tank. You see it's got algae growing on it. And there is some algae growing on the base of the tank, on the sand. So they should have some food to munch on over there. And the reason for the plastic wrap on top of the tanks is because with these feeders I have to leave the lids open. So by leaving the lid open, you're going to get some increased evaporation, and there's always that possibility that some of the fish might jump. I don't expect jumping, but just to help reduce the chance of any fish jumping out and get dried on the floor, as well as to help reduce evaporation, I just added plastic wrap to the 3 tanks that have their lids open. All these lights are on timers, and I'm just going to leave them on their regular schedule. I'm not going to change them at all, just to keep the fish used to the existing cycle that they're on, day-night cycle. So I'm not going to mess with the lights. So we'll see how things are after 7 days when I return. So I'm back from vacation, and everything looks all right. Fry tank over here got quite a bit more algae growing out, and I can see that the fry did go at the filter over there. That filter was actually loaded with algae compared to the other tank, and so in the process of having less food that I fed, they ended up munching on the algae over there. So for example, kind of looked like this over here. Looking at that filter over there compared to this filter, it's got a bunch of algae on it. So in that one they cleaned it off completely. This rock as well. So they cleaned all that up since I wasn't feeding them on a regular basis. There was a bunch of algae here on the front of the tank that I cleaned most of it off. So they had plenty of food, some decaying leaves as well, no lack of sustenance for them. The Gelitochromis parents are doing fine. Bunch of fry in there. They also had plenty of algae to munch on. The Lulupies are fine. All 4 accounted for, including the Gelitochromis, who's back there. He's also a big muncher of algae. Excuse the algae in the front of the tanks. Haven't had a chance to clean them off yet. But the only unexpected event was we had a power outage the day before I came back for a couple hours. Only thing it did is reset the lights. But other than that, no other issues with the tank. One problem I did have though is with this airline tubing right here. It's something I bought off Amazon. So with this airline tubing, it's not a great quality compared to the aquarium co-op black airline tubing that I bought. It's a little, just I guess the way it's made keeps popping off on this backflow preventer. So in this case, the backflow preventer prevents water from reverse siphoning, going back into the pump, or getting dumped onto the floor. So a couple times already it's popped out, and before leaving I put some painter's tape on to try and hold it, but even in that case it popped out. Might have happened during the power outage, I'm not sure. And the only thing that it really did is it stopped air flowing into this filter over here. So luckily this is an understock tank, they're just juvenile fry in there. If you're overstocked, you get a lot of fish in there, and there's no air flowing in there, you do run the risk of oxygen deprivation, lack of oxygen. But I think it might have been less than a day, maybe when the power outage, that's when it popped off. Because I use those same other backflow preventers on all of these tanks over here and do not have that same issue that I have with this airline tubing over here. When I first came down and saw the tank, I initially thought I had a dead fish that was partially eaten and stuck to the filter over there, but when I put the tweezers in there to pull it out, I realized it was just a piece of algae that kind of looked like a dead fish, but wasn't. So fortunately, did not lose any fish in this tank. Same with this tank here. Everybody's present and accounted for. With the fry, since I don't really have a full count of how many fry are in there, as well as in the tank with the parents, it's hard to say if there were any casualties. I don't think there were, but can't be 100% sure. Same with the shrimp. There's just so many shrimp that it's hard to say if there were any casualties. I'm also doubtful with them because they've got plenty to eat. And if there were any casualties, it was due to just old age or sickness or something. So I'm going to go take a look at the aquarium upstairs. So this is the upstairs tank. Had a little evaporation after being gone for 7 days. Fish are fine. Looking at me hungrily as usual. They did do a little redecoration in the tank. Other than that, no issues as well. The one thing I did notice with this tank, since this is upstairs, the other tanks are in the basement, it's a little cooler there because of the insulation, the being partly underground, it stays a little cooler in the basement. But up here, since I turned the air conditioner up in order to save energy, the temperature on the tank raised as well. So the temperature went up to 82 degrees, which is not too hot for these guys, they were fine. But then as the air conditioner ran, kept the house cooler for the couple of days, temperature is now back down to 77 degrees, and in which the heater keeps it at that temperature. That's all I have for this video. Thank you for watching. If you did like this, please hit that like button so others can find it too. Please also drop your thoughts in the comments below. How long have you gone on vacation and what have you done preparation-wise for your fish? Thanks again. I'll see you in the next video.